Hi, Blogging Heads viewers. It's Daniel Strauss of Woodruff and Strauss, and today I'm here with Bloomberg's Ben Brody, who for a few years now has essentially been one of my chief competitors. We both are sort of light to mid-range reporters who do the 24/7, always on, always available, quick hit stuff.
Yes. We're the competition.
Yeah, you are the competition. And Ben and I ran into each other. We finally met at a Bloomberg breakfast in New Hampshire while both of us were there. Was that the one? I went to two of them. Was that the one with Sununu, or is that the one with...
This was the Sununu, Judd Gregg establishment wisdom of New Hampshire that just couldn't have been more out of line.
Yeah, I don't remember what they said. A few things that were interesting, but it was all kind of a blur. I wasn't getting a lot of sleep while I was there.
No. No. Yeah,
I tell people, like, a big part of campaign reporting is driving, and you get in your car and you drive for 2 hours, and then you get out of your car and you listen to the same event, then you get back in the car and then drive for 2 more hours.
I found this great pile as I was like cleaning out my rental car in New Hampshire of Post-it notes where I'd like written directions for places where I thought that I was going to lose cell phone service and like needed the directions.
Wow, that is so smart.
It was like 1987. It was great.
By the way, that did occur to me a few times. Like, what was it like before we had GPS? Like, it must have been insane to do it. Like, there's no way. And I get lost with GPS. So, like,
right. Exactly.
There's no way around this. The other thing, I guess I want to drop a link in here that we'll link to later, is I think Ashley Parker, I think, the New York Times wrote a piece about how campaign reporting has gotten her to love books on tape. And I started doing that because there's only so much of my Pandora. There's like only so much Zed and Jay-Z I can listen to before I need something more than that.
Wow.
So I've started to listen to Audible and books on tape out of it. And I guess I need to cancel my free subscription so they don't charge me.
Yeah, I would do that. Yeah, Audible's the one where you get like 2 per. It's like not
right. I was about to cancel, and then they were like, "You can have 1 more," and I was like, "Oh, okay. I think I'll take."
Okay, fine, perfect. Yeah, great. Yeah, I'll do that. I'm a radio scanner, but that's
what is a radio scanner?
You know, you just hit scan on the radio and just let it go through the various collections of country and classic rock stations. You listen to a lot of Adele and a lot of like Justin Bieber.
I could, yeah.
I'm classless.
Jesus. So one of the things when we ran into each other at the Bloomberg breakfast was we were talking, I think, about John Kasich, and I was going on and on about how, despite like there was a strong perception, and I think the numbers sort of reflect that John Kasich's this really cheerful, upbeat, positive guy, and it was like a pitch he made hard in New Hampshire, right down to like blasting out clips of him in a snowball fight. But there's a lot of reporting, there's a lot of journalism out there. By Politico, Molly Ball has a good piece from a while back that I was just looking at about how he's a cantankerous guy, and even his close friends say that like they like him, but he's a little bit of a grump. And I don't know, man. That's not what the New Hampshire voters thought. And it's weird because I was up there mainly covering Chris Christie, and, you know, you would expect, like, Christie to be the one who to, like, my way or the highway, like, getting into fights. But he never really got into arguments, and he was never combative. And he lost. Badly. I mean, they all lost, right. But, like, he didn't place well at all.
No, absolutely not. It's a useful posture for him. He gets to play experience. He gets to play dad of twin girls. They're like 15, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that like family man, you know, I mean, there's a lot of reasons that like goes over really well. He gets to do consensus. I'm just shocked that it's lasted this long. I'm shocked that we haven't seen...
Kasich has lasted this long?
Well, I'm shocked that that nice guy John Kasich has lasted.
Oh yeah. I mean,
I'm shocked that he hasn't like gone off on one of us.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, he got a little heated He at this Bloomberg breakfast, him and Jonathan Martin got into it when Martin started pressing him about his endorsements from the New York Times and the Boston Globe and a bunch of newspapers around the state. Some of which, like, Republicans had been saying to me, like, listen, he did get those endorsements, but those are pretty liberal endorsements. And the Kasich people are sensitive about comparisons to Huntsman. And, like, Huntsman was endorsed by the Boston Globe, too.
Right.
But Kasich, unbelievably, is doing better than John Huntsman. And,
exactly. The question is, where does that go now? He keeps insisting that he has infrastructure in South Carolina. I haven't talked to anyone who has outside of the Kasich team who has told me, like, oh yeah, I see his guys, I see students for John Kasich all over Charleston.
Right. It's like, and that's what's going on, like, right now. And I think we're sending someone there, my colleague Kyle Cheney, on that. I don't know. I mean, the thing is, that was in everybody's mind on the Kasich Christie beat, and a lot of the reporters covering Kasich or Christie, like, if there'd be a day off for one of those guys, they'd go to the other guy's events. And I think CNN's Cassie Spodak sort of built her beat and is down in South Carolina because half of it was Christie and half of it was Kasich.
Right.
But a lot of people asked that, and, like, Christie did not have, I mean, he had a few guys in South Carolina, but he didn't have anything. Kasich has endorsements, and then Heather Crawford, who's a state representative down there, is, like, chairing him. But there's not much more than that. I mean, like, he has Adam Bentley's endorsement, or Governor Bentley of Alabama, and I'm trying to think what else. I mean, a few local lawmakers, but there's not much.
No, not much that I keep hearing. And Kasich is your land, certainly, but
and the weird thing about it is that it's very much Bush country, and Jeb Bush
has been for a long time.
Right. So that's why he's trotting out his brother, where in other parts of the country it probably wouldn't go so well, but it's going real well in South Carolina for him. And you can even see that in the last debate with when Donald Trump, like, blamed George Bush for 9/11, and there were audible boos from the crowd. It's a different land down there. But so the Kasich team's plan instead is to, like, and his spokesman is even, there's a much trafficked tweet from his spokesman Chris Shrimpf about it, which sort of suggested that essentially their plan is to survive South Carolina and then make it to the Midwestern states like Michigan and Ohio, where he has like a 70% approval rating last time I checked, but that might go down actually. And scoop up electoral votes there.
At this point, do they have money coming in? I mean, can they survive?
Well, they do have Ken Langone. They just got Ken Langone.
Yes, he did pull him.
But in writing that up, I was looking through FEC reports, and it turns out that Ken doesn't give a huge amount of money, actually. I mean, he's not dropping $10 million or something. Really? You got to go through the FEC files. He's not pretty stingy about his money. So, I mean, but that's symbolic. They're hitting up a lot of the Christie team, and they're trying to, get everything they can. I assume they want a Christie endorsement. Christie, I think, will go to Bush, because he's always said nice things about Jeb. The money is an issue, right? Like, and Lord knows they have a pretty nice bus, and, they're moving down there real fast. So I don't know. It's a good question.
I have to admit, I see this narrowing right now. Donors are getting antsy. They want a field that they recognize. They want to get behind a winner. Yeah. It's been a couple of states. We're in the third. We're looking to the fourth. We're looking to Super Tuesday. I see these
if you're South Carolina, right,
starting to dry out.
Yeah, but if you're it's funny because like we have to also remember like the showing coming out of New Hampshire was not what we expected, right? Like like our Bush reporter had been saying, like if Bush had finished behind Marco, and that's what happened. It would have been over, right? But instead, Jeb did better. I think I'm pretty sure, and and Marco placed in fourth. I think I'm going to look this up right now, actually. So if you're a donor in like South Carolina or a southern state, I don't know what you do, and you want to you don't want to back Ted Cruz. You want to back either Jeb. You want to back one of the establishment candidates. So either Jeb, Marco, or Kasich. I don't know what you do because a lot of Rubio's team is from down there, and their plan, even though they're not saying it, and it's kind of gone kaput now, was 3-2-1, right? So third place in Iowa, second place in New Hampshire, and that didn't happen. And first place in
let's dispel once for all this fiction that was part of their plan.
What? Sorry?
I said let's dispel once and for all this fiction that was part of their plan.
Yeah. This is not. I mean, New Hampshire was not. It did not turn out the way they wanted, and like the Rubio people are always saying, like we know exactly what we're doing. I don't know if they do. I mean,
it's a little unclear to me. There's also this looming thing that happens on March 15th, which is Florida, and it's going to be almost certainly very embarrassing for Jeb Bush. It's potentially going to be embarrassing for Marco Rubio as well. I think it's really going to test that team's sense of what they're doing. This message that like they're operating behind the scenes. It's no drama, but they're doing it. You know, the Republican.
I think it's so. I mean, the question is I guess South Carolina is a pivotal state for Jeb right now because if he still continues to not do well and sort of in the middle of the pack, especially in a state where he should do well or do better than his opponents, especially Marco, who's like not where we expected him to be, then then Florida is even more pivotal for him. I think his approval rating. I think they like Jeb okay there.
They do. They like Jeb just fine. That doesn't mean they vote for him necessarily.
Right. I don't know.
This has been the weird thing about the election. You know, the favorables kind of don't matter.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I am most curious actually to see how Donald does in South Carolina because there's actually plenty of reason to think that he won't do well, right? Like in Iowa, which is a little more politically similar to South Carolina than New Hampshire, he didn't get first place, right? And he's getting booed, and he's trashing trashing George, and they like George down there, and he's got a lot of competitors.
He's got a lot of competitors for that lane. Ted Cruz is doing strongly, and it's also
Ted Cruz remains the smartest guy in the field. We had
unquestionably
one of my colleagues. I was in a meeting with one of my colleagues, and like someone pointed out that like he was polling second in New Hampshire, and my colleague was just like, "That is one smart motherfucker," and it's true.
It's
true. He's the smartest guy in the room. Like,
do you remember when he got in? I mean, do you remember this? Like, we had 12 hours notice. It was at Liberty. We had to the people. I didn't.
Yeah, but even the Liberty thing, I thought was really smart, right? Because instead of doing it in Texas, which would have made sense, and that's what politicians normally do, they figured out a way to have a bunch of screaming conservative young people around him, cheering and like losing their minds.
Right.
I wasn't at that rollout, but I've been to Liberty and I've been to the hall and I saw the cameras and like it was really, really smart.
It was really smart, and I was thrown for a loop. We didn't expect it to happen that day. We didn't expect him to be first in. Yeah. And I think our first reaction was to be like, well, what the fuck is Ted Cruz doing?
Yeah.
And I think since then, the answer has been exactly what he needs.
Yeah, exactly what he's doing. But, like, I think Ted Cruz's team is getting harder, right? So in Iowa, they had the thing with the Carson is going to resign or something. And this is, like, the famous thing about Cruz is that he has his campaign manager is Jeff Rowe, Andy Kroll in the New Republic wrote a good profile of him recently, and
Great profile.
Roe has super hardball tactics. Sometimes even Republican operatives are like, that guy goes over the line a little too much or something. And I mean, every state has it's hard, but like especially in South Carolina, I think we're going to see more knife fighting that will bubble out into the. I mean, you and I see these things, and we can't like prove it. We're just like, oh, funny that happened, you know.
Right.
But I think it'll be more visible between the Rubio and Cruz camps because both of those guys are famous for doing whatever it takes, and they both really want to win that state.
They both really want it. I think South Carolina gets ugly.
So,
South Carolina.
So if Rubio doesn't do well in South Carolina, do you think he's done?
As I talk to people in the Midwest, what they tell me is that his exactly what you were saying, which is his team keeps saying, "Don't worry, we have it functioning behind the scenes.
Right.
You're just not seeing it. We're just not touting it." And I do hear that. You talk to party bosses, you talk to county chairmen, and they say, "I see Rubio's guys, I see Jeb guys, and occasionally I see Ted Cruz's guys."
Right.
What can he do if it becomes clear that he has lost momentum, and what can he do if people are nervous about him because of this robot attack that you have Democrats launching against him?
They love it. Like Chris Christie once again helping Democrats. Like they love the robot thing. You know, I guess it's because like it's the same sort of rule about what goes viral on the web, right? It's a perfect sample that confirms someone's suspicion, right? So the suspicion with Rubio has always been that he's not super substantive.
He's too programmed. He just has his lines.
Right. He just has his line. And then Christie just brought it out. Like, he just did it.
And as Rupert Murdoch put it, it was a murder-suicide. I think Rupert Murdoch said that. Like, Christie kind of knew that maybe he would go down, but he was willing to do it. Well, do you think Christie knew, or do you think that he thought he was going to say?
Chasing that, I don't know, there were a bunch of telling signs near the end, right? Like, one thing is that Christie's entire team and all of his top fundraisers were up there, and they had volunteer advisors and operatives who should have been on the campaign, right? So, Brittany Bramall, who used to be Lindsey Graham's spokesperson and is really good, was up there volunteering, but she was doing stuff that like really a paid staffer would be doing. Ken McKay, Christie's campaign manager, was on the scene. You don't and Mike Duhame were there. You don't usually have both the campaign manager and then Maria Comella, the senior advisor. You don't usually have like big three staffers like that all there because one of them has to be at HQ like coordinating for the next state and that stuff.
Right.
So they knew things. They knew it was do or die. I have been curious about that, and I just hadn't been able to report it out at the time what their polling did. There was a visible shift in the attention Christie was paying from like, okay, I could either bash these governors or like what do I do here and just go all in against Marco.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that's what in the end they saw as their only real path, which was attack Rubio. And in the end, it turns out that a lot of Republican voters, I think, don't like seeing. I mean, it's just a bummer, I think, to a lot of Republican primary voters to see Marco get beat up, even if they make him unlikable, right?
He does have that boyish face.
Right, he does have that boyish face. And there's a view in the GOP that Rubio is one of the only best hopes of being a consensus candidate and a candidate that can really knock out Trump in the end and be competitive against Hillary Clinton or maybe Bernie. I don't know. So, I think that's the reasoning why. I think they did know at the end.
And that's
what?
Have you noticed? You just said. Have you noticed that they started saying they always used to say, "I'm the best person to go up against Hillary Clinton in the fall. They've started saying I'm the best person to go up against Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. And some of it is setting him up. They want nothing more than to go up against him. And so to set him up is wonderful for them. But I think there's also been a shift that he is someone that they need to target. And they're giddy about that. I mean, they love the idea.
Yeah, they are. I mean, like, usually, I get that. Usually, in most years, I think it would just be good for Sanders, for Republicans. But the field is so wide, and if you look at fundraising numbers, it's not great. I mean, like, even Rubio, he's not raising huge sums. Sanders, if he has a good debate night, he can roll in $5 million just on that night alone from small donations, right? Christie and Kasich, respectfully, couldn't raise that much in an entire fundraising quarter. It's insane. No. So, like, but you talk to a lot of operatives who went through Obama 2008, and they remember, like, don't count anyone out because they can all be really strong in the end. But yeah, I think part of that is trolling, and part of that is like still that hope that they can run against a socialist, which will freak out a lot of Americans in the general. But I think Bernie's gotten so much attention, and in that sort of lovable way. I just think that maybe Bernie being a socialist in this election cycle where there are voters trying to decide between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders won't do as much damage as it would in like 2012 or any other year. It's just such a weird cycle.
And someone pointed out to me that the Republicans have been calling mainstream Democrats socialists for so long that when they finally get a socialist who is kind of a leftist Democrat,
it's too early.
Did they defang it accidentally 10 years ago when they started referring to Barack Obama as one?
Yeah,
it's not entirely clear.
I mean, yeah.
I think it freaks out fewer people than the Republicans assume right now.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's also like Bernie's lovable in his curmudgeonliness, right? Like, I mean, he has this likability that's out there to a lot of people.
I'm a native New Yorker, so like Bernie's curmudgeonliness is so like recognizable.
What do you think of Larry David's impersonations of Bernie?
We're in my kitchen here. I've just been stomping around my kitchen, like getting milk, getting beer, like cooking, just doing it. Just like 2% milk. Who puts 2% milk in coffee? Like, are you sure? Are you sure that it wasn't a sneeze, wipe, and shake? And I've just been alone in my kitchen, just doing this.
I mean, it's funny though. Like, I want to go back for a second to Bernie being a crank versus Kasich being a crank. Like, Kasich's handlers have clearly decided the crank thing is not going to work for him. Bernie just owns it.
He just so owns it.
Like, I was at Liberty University for a speech he gave there, and like right out the bat, he was like, "Okay, just to get things out of the way, you guys in the crowd probably disagree with me on gay marriage, on on abortion. Let's just get that up. That I think this, you think that, that's fine. Whatever you want to do, all right?" And then he went on about that. I don't know. I don't know how well that'll last. I think people still think it's funny in the same way they thought going up to the election cycle, Chris Christie being mean was kind of funny. So I don't know. Do you think in the end, do you think Kasich's curmudgeonliness could have the same appeal?
Could be useful. I think Kasich's curmudgeonliness
is there. No one believes me, but he's
I believe
a curmudgeon.
You.
Okay,
I believe you. I've seen it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely there. When you talk to Ohioans, they are so insistent that it is there. They have been watching it for a really long time.
Yeah.
It's real. It's like John Kasich as Angry Man. Did you see, I forget who wrote it, but the piece on when he wrote to Blockbuster about the violence in, I think it was a Quentin Tarantino movie, it was like Reservoir Dogs or something.
No.
And he just it was this ongoing letter writing campaign in the early 90s that he just like kept being like, you have to label movies like this, and he like, and his wife was like, Karen was like, okay, John, like, it's like that's enough.
Well,
like they get it.
We'll have
They're
a link to that
blockbuster. They
down
do
there
that all
if
the
we can
time.
find it. Yeah,
Right.
We'll
Oh,
get
it's
that.
amazing. It's great.
So I wanted to switch to, you wanted to talk about Ted Cruz for a little bit.
I did want to talk about Ted Cruz. I think that he's in a really interesting place right now. We've all said we're not in South Carolina. I'm in lovely DC, where we have like a beautiful winter dusting of snow.
Yeah.
I think he is playing this really fascinating game where he's trying to appeal to evangelicals the way he did in Iowa. He's trying to organize that. They are going for him, but not as strong as he needs right now. And
Why
he's
is
also
that? Why is that? Because Carson's fading, right? Like,
Carson is fading. It's unclear to me. I don't understand it, frankly. So he's doing that. At the same time, he's trying to reinvigorate the Marco Ted fight. And he's basically battling on both flanks. And I think he's in this really interesting position. Bloomberg Politics did a focus group. When you talk to people down there, they say they think Donald Trump is going to win. But they also say that
it's so weird that like Donald Trump is a New Yorker who like said nice things about Democrats. Why is he going to win the Republican primary in South Carolina? That makes no sense.
It makes no sense to me, but right now the polling is very strong for him. People assume he's going to win. That can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. But what they say, and I think what Ted needs to exploit, is that Donald Trump is abrasive, and it doesn't, the way in New Hampshire it played as telling it like it is, the way it worked for Chris Christie does not work for him in South Carolina nearly the same way. And Ted Cruz needs to exploit that he's a better man. Now, his 99 Senate colleagues are laughing at the idea, right. But
no one has ever been like, you know, Ted Cruz is a super good, honest guy. No one says that.
No, absolutely not. No. And that's I think why we're hearing out of Marco him actually calling him a liar, which I think is fair because Ted Cruz does it on the Senate floor. But Marco is using a word that, like, in the 19th century would get him into a duel. Like, he's really coming after him, and I think
Marco going after Ted. Yeah,
Marco going after Ted and calling him a liar and going after his purist conservative credentials. That's Ted Cruz. That's what Ted Cruz says. He's the
right. So there was they got like tense in the last debate where Rubio was like making fun of Cruz for speaking Spanish, and then Cruz spoke Spanish. I loved it. What did he say? He was like, "En español, please, por favor," or something.
Yeah, I don't speak Spanish, so it wasn't. I didn't follow along, but it was something like,
yeah, I don't know.
You know, if you want it was something like, if you want to have it in Spanish, we can do it right here.
Yeah,
which was great. I think that battle is. It's unclear to me if Ted Cruz can fight on both flanks, but I think it'll be a testament
to fight against at this point, right? Like, who's his rival on the other side?
I think he has to fight. I think he has to fight Donald Trump for the evangelicals, and he needs to fight Marco Rubio for the sort of militaristic establishment.
Ted is now in the hot spot.
I think so. I think so.
That's not good. That's not good.
But then he goes.
That's not good for Ted. I mean, I'm sure, you know, every time people have counted Ted out this cycle, he's come roaring back. So I'm sure it'll be okay. I don't know. You always like, so where Kasich's groundwork doesn't seem to really exist in the southern states, Cruz has been laying the ground. Like, Cruz in the beginning, instead of going for big name early endorsements, he just got every sort of far right local person, every like big name in this. He is like Lee Bright in South Carolina. In Mississippi, he has Chris McDaniel, who is
he does have Chris McDaniel.
Yeah, he does have Chris McDaniel. Is not going to win him any establishment points there.
No, certainly not. But every radio host,
I want to write a book about that Senate race. I do. I actually do. Maybe I'll go back and maybe someday.
Just don't break into anywhere while you're writing.
So now. And he's gotten some bigger evangelical endorsements since then, like Tony Perkins, I believe.
Yep, he's got Tony Perkins. He had Bob Vander Plaats, who obviously is Iowa-based, and that I think made a difference in Iowa. But I think it carries over. I think people know him.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So like, it's hard to imagine that like Cruz wouldn't do well there as Trump bounces along. Like, frankly, if I'm Cruz, I look at the Romney playbook, right, and just assume now that he's at a point where Trump is going to go up and down, and there might be other fluctuations, but they just need to keep a steady course up, and they'll be fine. You know, that's the assumption I get from this. What do you think?
Yeah. I think that's basically, and I think he has exactly what you said, the strength of what he's doing in the South. I think if
like
he
the South
concentrates
is
there.
the South is good. The South is like Cruz's time to crush his opponents. He needs to knock out Marco in the southern states, and I mean, Kasich's plan really is not to do well there. So he needs to just he needs to just stop Trump, ideally, if possible.
Yeah,
but Marco is like we've seen from the last debate that Marco is the top priority, right?
I think that's very, very clear. That Marco is the top priority.
It's make or break time because if Marco does do well in South Carolina, he's viable in a whole new way. Like if he places second, he's going to be awesome, and you know, and he's been endorsed. Look, he's been endorsed by Tim Scott,
right.
And
Trey Gowdy.
And
Nikki Haley seems sweet on him. And
yeah, I don't know. I mean, my understanding is that Haley wants a place on the national stage. There are always persistent rumors that she wants to be the VP or something.
She'd be she has every reason to be on the short list.
There's a lot of respect for Haley within the party right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know where she. I don't know.
You don't think she'd spend that capital to go for Marco?
Yeah, I don't think she's going to endorse it all in the same way that Terry Branstad. Even less so, because Branstad didn't endorse, but like he did some last minute appearances with Christie and Jeb, and like he allowed a lot of his campaign team to work for Christie. I don't think Haley's gonna do that.
I don't see her getting that involved. I agree.
It would be a coup for anyone. It
would be an absolute coup for anyone. Yeah.
I don't see. So I think most of the big name endorsements in South Carolina are already locked up, and they just now they're just gonna like hammer it out. I don't know. I think as I recall, Cruz has more money than Marco.
Yes. He does. He's got a lot of money.
Yeah. So Cruz is in a better position. It's just hard to see at this point how Cruz isn't in a better position, even if he loses South Carolina or drops behind Marco, which I don't think he will, but it's possible.
Strategically, I think you're right, and I don't see him dropping behind Marco either. And strategically and looking toward the future, I think that's absolutely true. And as you said, it's the make or break moment for Marco. It's also the make or break moment for the establishment to stop Donald Trump. And they have reached a fever pitch of anxiety, I think.
It's funny that Jeb and Kasich really haven't gone at it at each other. Like Kasich, like we talk about, he likes to say like I don't attack other, but he says like there have been moments where he's been like Jeb's record isn't as good as mine, or I balance budgets. Jeb didn't. He just sort of like mumbles it under his breath.
He lets the super PAC do it a lot.
Yeah, and the New Day for America super PAC does all the dirty work that the Kasich campaign. It's a sweet deal, right? Like,
yeah,
no, those are just some supporters. I don't talk to them at all. But like, I mean, like, we actually reported this ad from New Day for America. That John Weaver, the chief strategist for Kasich, like said over Twitter, like, and this wasn't coordination, I guess. That this ad, including a clip of Kelly Ayotte, should be taken down attacking Marco, and they took it down. But like, and Kasich said that was a good idea. But the thing with candidates and super PACs is that most of the time, if you can't, if a candidate doesn't like denounce something a super PAC is doing, it kind of has their blessing in the end. So it's this murky thing on that front.
And if they denounce it on Twitter, then it's fine because it's in public.
So one thing we didn't even get to that I wanted to lead off of actually was the Supreme Court. Over the weekend, Antonin Scalia died.
Sure did.
And in pure political fashion, it took about 3 seconds or a blink of the eye for people to start talking about how to politicize this and start talking. Not everyone did. A lot of Republicans and a lot of Democrats gave it, 24 hours, said nice things about Scalia. That happened. But I'm not a congressional reporter. I don't know how much of that you've done, Ben, but my understanding is that it is going to be unmistakably political here because Mitch McConnell, right out of the gate, said that the president shouldn't name a nominee, and he signaled that the Senate Republicans are going to oppose any nominee, and Democrats kind of want this. They want like an obstructionist fight again, and they want to at least put up someone who's very, very qualified to just paint the GOP field as intensely partisan. And that person would probably be in limbo for a while until President Donald Trump, President Ted Cruz, President Bernie Sanders, or President Hillary Clinton takes office. Or President Marco Rubio. Right?
I think you diagnosed it exactly right. This is one of those great political fights where everyone loves to have the fight.
Right.
As soon as Mitch McConnell comes out and says this, his normal enemy inside his own party, Ted Cruz, all of a sudden is right at his back and says, we need to make the 2016 presidential election a referendum on the Supreme Court. That is the reddest of red meat when it comes to Ted Cruz supporters. They see the Supreme Court as nothing more than a sort of constitutionally blessed liberal overreacher inside the federal government. They love this.
So that move was to energize Cruz's supporters and Republicans, right? And just like fight the liberal, fight evil Obama, and fight Mitch McConnell on this.
Exactly. And so that does great. I can't imagine Mitch McConnell directed it at Ted Cruz because they hate each other so much. But clearly to energize the base at the moment of South Carolina. And then the Democrats, as you say, get to paint Republicans as obstructionists, as the problem, as the reason Washington doesn't work, is the reason that your paycheck hasn't gone up. And, that everybody wins in this fight except the American people.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's hard to imagine even Obama thinks maybe they, the White House has notched the almost 2 terms, the White House has been able to outmaneuver Republicans in sort of these super unconventional events like the shutdown or the grand bargain or those sorts of things. I don't know this time though. I mean, this was not supposed to happen, right?
No.
RBG or someone else was expected to, because they're older and less fit than old Tony, and
this was not supposed to happen.
This is an unprecedented moment because if the Obama administration gets some young, healthy liberal in there, or moderate to liberal, that person's going to be in there forever, and that's going to change the balance of the Supreme Court.
For a generation.
Ironically, though, it turns out this election shows us that Citizens United, one of the biggest mistakes in liberals' eyes of the Supreme Court, doesn't really matter that much. Super PACs don't seem to make a fucking difference. At all.
No, unless you're John Kasich, but that's really it.
Yeah, but even then, they're not, anyone with a super... There were a lot of... Scott Walker had a well-funded super PAC.
Sure did.
And he's gone. He's
gone.
Chris Christie's super PAC raised $10 million, I think, in the third quarter, and they're gone. You just keep going down the list. Super PAC... And Right to Rise, Mike Murphy. So maybe this won't matter in the end. Maybe nothing the Supreme Court does anything. Because,
maybe.
Right to Rise, what? They had $100 million. They've spent $50 million.
100, 110. They spent 50.
Yeah.
They are dropping $6 million here, $12 million there. And Jeb Bush is stuck, just stuck. He's not going anywhere. He moves occasionally from 2 to 4, 3 to 5 in a poll.
Yeah.
Super PACs can't, it turns out, manufacture enthusiasm. They can't manufacture the earned media that Donald Trump gets. They can't give you enough organization to make a difference in a place like Iowa. It just turns out not to matter. I mean,
it doesn't really matter. I mean, maybe it does for...
It has to matter somewhere. If this weren't such a weird election, do you think it would matter?
I mean, usually it would. And to be fair, also, like, Cruz has, like, 6 super PACs. He has Keep the Promise 1, Keep the Promise 2. I don't know how many. There are, like, 3 or... I think there are 4 sanctioned super PACs.
There are 3 or 4.
Yeah. And then the rest, there are other ones that are just sort of floating out there.
And like the most super PAC-y like scenario ever. Like it's like funded by a reclusive billionaire who hasn't talked to the press in like 10 years. Robert Mercer, who like literally funds research on like prolonging life through machines, and like there's a
he sounds like a cartoon villain.
He's actually a cartoon villain, and he like even his closest friends don't know what he thinks, and he like came of age inside a dark lab where he didn't talk to anyone, but became fascinated with computers. Yeah, he's a Marvel supervillain. So Ted Cruz is the most super PAC-y super PAC ever, and his energy doesn't seem to be coming from it. His energy seems to be coming from him, from the evangelical base. From organizing, from voter targeting.
So the other thing that I've noticed recently is that Cruz has started to talk about bringing in Reagan Democrats. I don't know what Reagan... Well, who are the Reagan Democrats, Ben? Are those like the guys who support... Wasn't Jim Webb supposed to like bring in Reagan Democrats?
Jim Webb, classic Reagan Democrat. This week, everyone thought he was going to launch this independent bid for those Reagan Democrats, for those guys in Appalachia and Arkansas, where he spent some time growing up, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia.
So this is one of the things we were talking about, right? Like, Jim Webb is a perfect example of someone who missed his shot, because he didn't launch his independent bid, right? And in 2008, 2007, like I was saying to you at the Bloomberg breakfast, like, the Obama team were like, we haven't decided who we're going to pick for VP, but it's probably going to be Jim Webb.
It's going to be Jim Webb, right?
Everyone thought it was going to be Jim Webb. I remember telling my friend who was a Democrat, like, there's this guy named Jim Webb. He's from Virginia. He's a Southerner. He used to be Reagan's Navy secretary. And she was like, ooh.
For all of 17 months.
Yeah, and he said no, right? Like, he did this very publicized speech where he was like, if I'm not named to be... Vice President, I'm going to decline that nomination, and that was it. He chose Uncle Joe instead, and I don't think the Obama administration has ever looked back. And since then, like Webb has had this quixotic, like presidential bid involved. Like I don't know.
The secret about Jim Webb is he hates the process. He hates donors. He hates, there's a great story about him where he was a Marine lieutenant, highly decorated from Vietnam. And, at one of his early events when he was running for Senate in Virginia, a campaign staffer instructed the band to play the Marine Corps hymn. And he like threatened to beat up the staffer. And he was like, you will never use my Marine Corps heritage as a political like cudgel again. And then of course what he did was he like spent the entire time on the campaign trail wearing his son's boots. His son was also a Marine serving in Iraq at the time. He hates the process. He doesn't actually have a very good sense for a clear message. He didn't want to be out there. I think he realized that he would need to be living on a bus, and he like has a wife and kids, and they're fairly young, and he has some older kids as well.
A wife and young kids.
He has young kids.
I just don't understand what these candidates, like Rand also did not like going to donor meetings. Like, what did they think
this was about?
Like, what do you think? It's not, I guess, like, there are these candidates who think they'll just, like, be awesome and they'll be wide-ranging. Like, even Ted, those wide-ranging speeches, like, also come with Ted asking for money and going to New York and talking to gay hoteliers to ask for money.
Right.
It's like, it's most of running for president is asking for money and giving the same stump speech. It's not fun.
At least accepting that. Like, Hillary Clinton doesn't like it either, but she happens to be fairly good she happens to be incredibly good and practiced at it.
Right.
It's just at least accepting that that's part of it. You don't have to love it, but you like have to accept that that's part of it.
Right.
I don't know. Webb is a national security guy, had really broken from the Obama administration on these issues.
Yeah.
Maybe he wanted to speak to those. He also, I think, thinks that the party is in a strange place vis-a-vis connections to some of the racial issues. Coming back to Reagan Democrats, which is what you said, he wants a party
what
that...
Reagan Democrat is going to vote for Ted, though? What is a Reagan Democrat? I mean, I guess a Reagan Democrat would want, would Kasich, I guess, or Jeb, right?
A Reagan Democrat, a person who fits the profile of who a Reagan Democrat was in 1980, is certainly not going to vote for Ted. The people who might are the people who were Reagan Democrats in 1980, but have been Republicans for 36 years and have grown increasingly more conservative with the party and have followed white blue collar support of the Republican Party all the way over and then to the right. Those people might well vote for Ted Cruz, but they have been Republicans for 35 years,
right.
For a really, really long time. They have raised very Republican kids, and they are deeply suspicious of the federal government in a way that Ted Cruz speaks to.
Right.
they're not Democrats in any sense of the imagination.
So I wanted to close out with one last thing, which is since you're a native New Yorker,
yes,
Michael Bloomberg. What do you think? Oh, right, you work for Bloomberg.
I do.
Can you talk about that at all? If you can't, you can't.
Work for Bloomberg.
Okay, all right. Can't talk about that. All right, we'll stay away from that one. You've been a good employee right now, Ben.
Yes, I'm trying.
Well, that's all I've got, man. What are you doing next? Do you have a portfolio right now? I've been told that I'm going to be doing a lot more Bernie stuff, but who knows? So.
That would be great. No, we're sort of regrouping now, figuring out where our advice goes, and I am apparently part of something called Rapid Response, which I have been saying is like Spotlight, but obviously clearly isn't. And it's going to be me, I think, flying off to places on a day's notice and or working weird overnight shifts for debates. Glamorous life of a reporter, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing. One of the things that annoyed me early on in being a campaign reporter was how often you get asked about travel, and people are like, do you get to travel? And it's not some of it is fun. Anytime you can go to Charleston, you should go to Charleston.
But
right. There's some not so glamorous parts of the country you have to go to too. And it's the same thing with debates. It's a badge of pride that you get to go to these debates, but you don't actually even sit in the room, right? You sit in a holding room. You sit in a holding room across the street from, at St. Anselm, it was across the street.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And then you go to the spin room where there are all these surrogates who are all saying, my guy, kicked ass.
Knocked it out of the park.
And
you're like, no, he didn't. He repeated the same line about Barack Obama 4 times in one answer.
Right. So, it's not, there's not the biggest value in reporting on the campaign trail is going to somewhere where nobody else is going. Like my bosses, I haven't actually pitched them on this, and I think we have a different Kasich reporter, but we should probably be sending people should be sending to New Hampshire or to Michigan to run against to see what Kasich is doing there and
just live there for
Midwestern pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Ben, thanks very much for your time. And
thank you for having me.
This is Daniel Strauss from Woodruff and Strauss. Thanks for coming on. Have a good one.
Thanks a lot.